That night, standing in front of my father's old house, the childhood home filled with memories, the funeral notice still faintly scented with cold white incense taped to the door, I never imagined that this very place would become the battleground where the bond between brothers nearly shattered beyond repair. Who would have thought the thing strangling my heart wasn't just the grief of losing Dad, but the cold silence, the icy stares of family blood turned distant, within walls that once held warmth and love. But the real tragedy was just beginning. One key rendered useless, a door slammed shut, and behind it, shadows of secrets no one expected, missing heirlooms, broken promises, and a family bond weaponized into Cold War. That night, I realized losing Dad was only the start of the pain. The deepest wounds came from the one blood relative I trusted most. What would you do if you stood at the crossroads of justice and family, knowing that inside that house lies a truth that could either save your legacy or destroy everything you hold dear? Before we dive in, drop a comment below letting us know which city you're watching from. Enjoy the video. The last time I saw my father alive, the late summer sun was pouring through the hospital blinds, turning the sterile room a shade of gold that reminded me of quiet Sundays, the kind when the three of us, Dad, John, and me, would sit together in the old house eating pancakes, pretending those moments could stretch on forever. Now, standing at the foot of his hospital bed, I was forced to realize what everyone always says isn't just a line: you don't know it's the last time until much, much later. Dad's hand in mine was thin, bones showing under papery skin, but his grip was somehow as strong as always when he looked at us, his sons, for what would be the final time. Beside me, John stood ramrod straight. He hadn't left Dad's side for weeks, barely sleeping, running the house, shuttling between the hospital and errands. There was love in that sacrifice, frustration too. I'd come from out of town, tangled up in guilt, wishing I'd visited more. Beneath the grief simmered an unspoken tension, the old competition of brothers, never fully dying, even when our father was. Dad's last words, I still hear them: promise me, boys. Take care of each other. And of our home. I want you both to have everything I built. His gaze darted between us, pressing those words into the space between. Don't let this house break you apart. Family is all you have when I'm gone. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. John looked away. The funeral came faster than any of us could prepare for. Our childhood neighbors, Dad's war buddy Mr. Kearns, my Aunt Helen from out west, all gathered in the living room. The same room where I once built blanket forts and John played guitar by the flickering fireplace. Food was dropped off on mismatched plates. Condolences blurred together. I couldn't stop searching for my father's solid presence in the emptiness. After the service, family filled every room of the house, laughter and sobs echoing off the walls, people huddled in corners trading stories. Yet in the center of it all, a strange hollowness. I saw my cousin Jamie, who used to spend weekends at our place as a kid, slipping upstairs to just sit in Dad's reading chair, tears on her cheeks because she'd never get to talk books with him again. Uncle Gary, Dad's younger brother, sharp-suited and business-minded, kept eyeing the grandfather clock, already asking questions about the estate that made my stomach twist. As the gathering faded and the last relatives filed out, an uneasy quiet settled over the house. I found John sitting on the back steps, staring at his hands. We should start sorting things, I guess, I said, voice barely above a whisper. He shrugged, jaw clenched. Later. Let's just be here a while. A week passed, then two. I tried to talk about next steps, the will, the house, the things Dad wanted us to split. But John began locking the doors, politely at first. Let me take care of the details, he'd say, voice hard. You wouldn't understand what it's like cleaning up after everything. Just let me have this. Suddenly, every request of mine to stop by was answered with, another day. The inside of our house, our home, became somewhere I was no longer welcome. And there was a growing sense, deep in my gut, that something had already begun to fracture beyond repair. Because sometimes, it's not the big things, a parent's passing, the reading of a will, a family ceremony, that mark the start of a family's unraveling. It's the moments in between. The silences. The doors quietly locked from the inside. The promises made in a hospital room, already dissolving under the weight of old hurts, new fears, and the battle lines no one wants to admit they see forming. As I stood alone on the porch that evening, the house behind me still humming with ghostly echoes of Dad's stories, I realized, this was just the beginning. The promises we made weren't strong enough to hold us together, not when trust, resentment, and longing each tugged us in different directions. And I couldn't have known then, as the sun set, as lights flickered out one by one in the home I thought I'd always belonged to, just how far those cracks would spread, or how deeply they would wound. But what happens next when brother turns against brother, and the home you shared becomes a fortress of secrets? That's where the real story begins. The days after the funeral slid by in slow, surreal waves. Grief doesn't always scream. Sometimes it settles in quietly, finding its way into every shadow of a home you thought was unshakable. I thought Dad's passing would draw us closer, that loss could heal old wounds. But it was the opposite. Every memory, every silence, seemed to hollow out more distance between me and John. At first, it was just subtle. I'd call ahead, wanting to stop by the house, Dad's house, now legally ours, just to pick up some childhood books for my daughter, maybe talk through the will together. It's not a good weekend. There's too much going on, John would say, always in that tight, tired voice. I just cleaned, I'm exhausted. Next week? Week after week, door always just out of reach. I brushed it off as grief. After all, John had lived with Dad, cared for him during those final months, sacrificing his own life in ways I could barely understand from a distance. Maybe he needed time. I reasoned, maybe he feels like the house is all he has left. But then the week stretched into a month, then two. I tried keeping connections alive, texting family group chats, checking in with my Aunt Helen. One afternoon, on a video call with my cousin Jamie, she lowered her voice. He won't let me in the house either, you know. Said everything's a mess. He seemed off. I heard something in her voice, worry, but also resentment. We weren't just losing Dad, we were watching those old family ties unravel, thread by fragile thread. I started feeling like an outsider to my own childhood, the living room with the mismatched lamp, Dad's battered old recliner by the window, the yellowing wallpaper where we marked our heights each summer. I pictured John inside, lights dim, curtains drawn tight. It wasn't just a locked door. It was a wall as thick as concrete, made of old pride and unspoken argument. Anger edged in next. I finally drove over, an hour on the highway, my wife and daughter in the car. The gates were unlocked, my old key still fit. But when I rang the bell, I saw movement behind the frosted glass, then nothing. I called John, he answered, voice tense, "You can't come in today. It's not a good time." I kept my cool as long as I could, pressing about Dad's belongings, Mom's jewelry, the guitar he promised he'd set aside. "You'll get your share," he snapped. "Just trust me. I need more time." Trust. What a luxury that seemed. My daughter, only 7, was sitting in the back seat, clutching a drawing she'd made for Uncle John, her favorite memory of Grandpa's garden. I told her, "Not today, sweetheart." She looked so disappointed. I remember thinking, is this where loss multiplies? Where we inherit not just sadness, but suspicion? That bitter summer dragged on. My wife tried to console me, reminding me of all the good in the world beyond these 4 walls, but it was hard to let go. Not when every phone call went in circles, every text left on read. And always, the sense someone was hiding something. Or hiding from me. Even friends of the family started to notice. Mr. Kearns called me, his voice rough with age. "Your brother's not himself." You two oughta sit and talk. That house means too much to let bitterness have its way. If only it were so simple. Grief wasn't the wedge. It was the excuse. Hurt and resentment were the hammer, driving a seemingly invisible wedge deeper every single day. It was no longer just about Dad's belongings or the house itself, but about lost trust and a sense of betrayal twisting in the pit of my stomach. I began to wonder what was truly happening behind those locked doors. What, exactly, was John protecting? Was it Dad's legacy, or his own secrets? The lines between mourning and mistrust lost focus, reality blurring with suspicion. And as each day closed with a door I couldn't open, I realized the hardest walls to break aren't made of wood or glass, but of silence, pride, and the memories we hold too tightly. But silence, inevitably, is broken. And secrets don't stay hidden forever. I had no idea then how deep the betrayal ran, or how much more painful truths would soon emerge. The first real cracks appeared the day a neighbor mentioned seeing strangers leaving our house carrying antique boxes. The invisible wall was crumbling. And my fight for answers, for justice, for Dad, maybe even for myself, had barely even begun. Sometimes, it's a casual conversation that exposes the deepest fault lines in a family. For me, it was a call from Mr. Kearns, Dad's old friend, the one who knew every creak in our floorboards and cherished every one of Dad's odd old treasures. That Saturday morning, his gruff voice held an edge I'd never heard before. "Listen, son, I thought you should know. A couple weeks ago, John offered to sell me one of your father's prized clocks. Said you were fine with it. Is that true?" His words sent a chill down my spine. No, I hadn't agreed to anything. In fact, I was barely allowed through the door. I stammered out a thank you and hung up, heart hammering, mind racing. Was John selling Dad's things behind my back? Seeds of doubt fully sprouted now. I started searching, restless. Old family friends, dusty Facebook groups, eBay alerts. Desperation made me bold. I scrolled endless listings of antiques, guitars, watches that looked strangely familiar. Then I saw it, a sunburst Fender Jazz Master, just like the one Dad let us play as kids, and always threatened to auction to pay for college when we fought. The seller's username? A nickname John used on every gaming forum since high school. I called my wife into the room, her brow furrowed as she compared photos on my phone to old snapshots of the guitar propped beside the fireplace. "It's the same one," she whispered, voice barely steady. Sick with realization, I confronted John with everything I found, the call with Mr. Kearns, the online listing, the gnawing suspicion festering inside me for months. "What are you doing, selling Dad's things? I'm your brother, why lie?" He went silent, then bristled, defensive. "Someone has to keep up the house. There's property tax, insurance, bills, what do you expect me to do?" His justification rang hollow. The truth twisted between us like barbed wire. He insisted he was protecting our inheritance, covering costs, but the numbers didn't add up. He hadn't asked. He hadn't given me a chance to say goodbye to the very things that carried my father's memory. Beneath the anger, something deeper, I felt betrayed in a way I never imagined possible. The home we'd grown up in, the treasures our parents left for us, the rings, the watches, the guitar John strummed at Thanksgiving when we still remembered how to share a table. All disappearing, piece by piece, without a word. I started to wonder what hurt most, the loss of the objects, or of the trust that should have kept us together. I remembered Dad's promise, and how quickly it was unraveling. My daughter saw me pacing late at night, asked if something bad had happened. I had no answer I could give a child, I barely had one for myself. As news of the sale spread among the family, more questions rolled in, from Aunt Helen, who drove in to check on the family silver, and Jamie, who messaged me, "Did John sell Grandpa's medals?" I saw one listed online. Accusations and suspicions rippled out, reaching every corner of the family like poison. I realized then, betrayal doesn't just come from strangers. Sometimes, it's someone you love who changes the locks, who empties the closets, who trades away your shared past for reasons you may never fully understand. My grief twisted with anger, disappointment, and an urgent sense of responsibility, not just to Dad, but to myself, my daughter, and every memory at stake. I knew I couldn't stand by as everything we once were slipped through our fingers, and all that remained were shattered promises and a house with more secrets than rooms. This was more than a lost clock or a sold guitar. This was the line, the one between confrontation and letting go, between protecting legacy and losing family for good. But if secrets could hide behind locked doors, I was about to find out what hid behind broken ones. And as I wrestled with betrayal and resolve, I realized, true strength sometimes means tearing down the walls your own brother builds, and standing up for the ghosts you cannot let be stolen. Next came the reckoning, a confrontation neither of us could avoid, and the battle lines of family drawn deeper than ever before. I still remember the morning I drove over with my wife and a stomach full of dread, a folder of legal paperwork strapped beside me on the passenger seat. Rain smeared the windshield, turning the old family neighborhood into a slow-moving blur, every street corner reminding me of childhood, before all these secrets and betrayals. I had tried, again and again, to reach John, calls, texts, even a letter drafted by my attorney, pleading for a straightforward conversation, for honesty, for a chance at reconciliation. Silence answered me each time. That day, the silence broke with the scrape of a key that no longer fit the lock. My old key, the one I'd kept since college, the one that always opened our father's door, was useless. The lock had been changed. My wife's hand gripped mine, her eyes tense with worry, as we stood under the eaves in the growing rain. We rang the bell, knocked, nothing. Behind the curtains, I saw movement, a flicker of the TV, a passing shadow. John was there, avoiding our gaze, refusing even to acknowledge we existed outside those walls. My voice was tired, almost an echo of yesterday's arguments. "John, please. Let's talk. We have to sort this out." There was only more silence. Then, finally, his voice through the door, small, hard, and shaken, "Go home. You're not welcome here today. I told you, when I'm ready, I'll call." That was the moment something in me changed. The grief had turned to anger before, now it transformed again, settling into a kind of cold resolve. As much as I hated it, this was no longer just about two brothers disagreeing, it was now about what was right, about legacy, about principles that went beyond even blood. I called the lawyer, my voice shaking but firm. "He's changed the locks. He won't even open the door." My attorney, Mr. Calloway, didn't hesitate. "You've done everything right. It's time to escalate. We'll file for a court order. You have a legal right to enter as co-owner and beneficiary. I'll come with you next time, and bring the police if needed." That night, I barely slept. My wife sat up with me, rubbing circles on my back, whispering, "No matter what happens, you're right to fight for this. For your dad. For your family." I believed her, but it didn't stop the ache, the wish that somehow John would just unlock the door, let me inside, and maybe let us both start healing. The following afternoon, we arrived with backup, my attorney, a local police officer for a civil standby, and, finally, a locksmith. The house stood quiet, almost defiant, the porch glistening with the aftermath of rain. John's car was gone, maybe by design, maybe out of fear, but the tension was still thick as ever. The locksmith worked quickly, the lock gave way with a heavy click. The door swung open, and the scent inside was no longer comfort, but absence and dust and something unnameable. The officer nodded, notebook in hand. My attorney whispered, "Just document everything. Take it slow." We stepped inside, hearts hammering. Rooms once alive with laughter and arguments were ransacked, drawers splintered, shelves empty. My wife tiptoed behind me, taking pictures, pointing out details, a footprint in the dust, a missing picture frame that once held our parents' wedding photo. Suddenly, the house felt more like a crime scene than a home. Mementos and treasures gone. Echoes of the past wiped away by secrecy and desperation. My attorney shook his head in disbelief. The police officer, gentle but firm, asked for a list of missing items, promising to file a full report for theft and possible asset conversion as part of the estate proceedings. As I walked through each empty room, I felt a strange combination of sadness, outrage, and resignation take root. How far had John fallen, to do this not just to me, but to Dad's legacy, to our entire family? How far had I come, forced into a role I never wanted, fighting my own brother in court, standing by as strangers inventoried my childhood memories for evidence? On the way out, I paused in the entryway, where a faded photograph still hung, the last relic overlooked, perhaps, or simply meaningless to John. All three of us, smiling, arms around each other, no hint of these future battles. Outside, as the locksmith replaced the lock for the last time, my attorney placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing. Sometimes, to honor our loved ones, we have to stand up for their wishes, even if it means losing something else along the way." In that moment, I knew the next chapter wouldn't be simple: legal filings, courtrooms, more painful confrontations. I braced myself, not just for a legal battle, but for the final, irreversible shattering of the family I once thought unbreakable. Because sometimes, in the fight for what's right, you lose things far beyond what the law can return. And as I closed the door behind me, realized, this wasn't just about property anymore. It was about finding out who I was, when pushed to the edge. The reckoning wasn't over yet. The real showdown, in court, and in my own heart, was just beginning. The day I finally stepped back inside my childhood home, it felt nothing like coming home at all. With each hesitant footstep, I was bracing for the kind of heartbreak you can't prepare for, the heartbreak of seeing the past erased, piece by piece, by someone you once trusted without question. The air inside was chilling, not because of any open window, but because of the emptiness. The halls that once rang with Dad's laughter, the echo of John's guitar, even the heavy, familiar thud of the front door closing behind me, all of it replaced by an unnatural silence, the hollow kind that comes after everything important has already been taken. My attorney led the way, quietly recording every detail. The police officer with us glanced around with professional detachment, but couldn't hide a flicker of surprise at the way the house looked: shelves, cabinets, drawers stripped bare or left gaping and broken, as if someone had tried to erase every memory with hurried, desperate hands. My wife stayed close, eyes glassy, camera in hand, as she catalogued the damage for the court, but really, I think she was just trying to preserve what was left for me. In the living room, Dad's prized clock collection had vanished, only faint outlines on wallpaper remained, like ghosts mourning their own disappearance. The old record player, once the centerpiece of every family gathering, was gone. I moved from room to room in a daze, the absence of each treasure landing like a physical blow. The watch collection had been wrenched from Dad's locked desk, the drawers hanging off their hinges. The guitar cases were missing, the mantle uncluttered, even Mom's jewelry box, which Dad kept hidden in the back of the closet, for me, was empty, its velvet lining left behind like a cruel joke. Fragments of my parents' lives, our family's history, had simply vanished. What hurt the most wasn't the material value, though that, too, stung. It was the unmistakable sense that every item lost was one more thread torn from the tapestry of who we were. Amid the chaos, I found a handful of things overlooked: a box of dusty photo albums filled with faded Polaroids, Dad's medals from his Navy days, and my mother's locket, dropped behind a dresser. The picture inside, of two brothers grinning arm in arm, a painful reminder of everything I'd lost. That's when the real grief hit, bigger than anger or betrayal, the grief for a family story, broken not just by time, but by the choices of the very people who should have protected it. In that moment, I mourned not just my parents, but the version of my brother who'd once sworn to do right by them, who'd promised to keep their memory alive alongside me. While taking photos in the den, my cousin Jamie called, her voice trembling. She'd heard from Mr. Kearns that pawn shops in town were already being canvassed for Dad's watches. It was only a matter of time before even those traces of him disappeared, sold off to strangers who'd known nothing of their true worth. My attorney found a stack of papers on the dining table, evidence of a recent loan against the house, signed only by John. He shook his head, quietly confirming what I'd feared. Betrayal not just of me, but of every trust our father had left behind. The police officer took notes, promising an investigation, but nothing he said could piece back together what was already lost. As we left the house, I looked back one last time at the staircase where John and I used to race, at the patch of paint on the wall still marked with the heights of every birthday. I understood, suddenly and deeply, that pain doesn't always come from losing what you love. Sometimes, the greater wound is not being able to protect it. But through the tears and fury, something within me settled. I couldn't erase the damage, couldn't turn back time. What I could do now was fight for justice, not just for myself, but for the memory of my parents, and maybe, somehow, for whatever was left of my family's honor. Because sometimes, tragedy leaves you no choice but to become your own guardian, of memory, of legacy, and of the hope that you'll never let history repeat itself. And as I prepared for the court battle to come, I realized, true strength isn't just about holding on to the past. It's having the courage to face what's been lost, and to fight, even alone, for what still remains. What happens when the wounds run too deep for forgiveness? Would test not just the law, but the very soul of our family's story. It's strange, how the biggest fights in life are ended not by shouting, but by signatures on paper. The day we stepped into the courthouse, my attorney beside me, John across the room avoiding my eyes, I could feel every ounce of our shared childhood weighing in the silence. Even the air felt tense, thick with things unsaid, grief, betrayal, regret. The legal battle itself unfolded like a slow-motion car crash. Evidence laid bare, photos of the empty rooms, boxes of family heirlooms gone, receipts and listings of Dad's things auctioned to strangers. My Aunt Helen took the stand, her voice trembling as she told the judge how much Dad's silverware meant to her, how devastated she was seeing the family torn apart. My cousin Jamie cried quietly in the back, clutching one last photo of us as boys. John's defense was desperate, full of excuses and half-truths. He claimed he only sold items to pay for repairs or taxes, said he was preserving the family legacy, in his own way. But the judge's gaze was steel. You were entrusted, he said, not just with property, but with your brother's trust. You failed both. When the ruling came down, it landed like a stone in the pit of my stomach. John was found in breach of his fiduciary duty and liable for the value of everything he'd sold, watches, guitars, even Mom's wedding ring. The judge ordered the house must be put up for sale. If John couldn't pay what he owed, he'd lose his home as well. There was no celebration. Instead, in the echoing corridors outside the courtroom, I saw John for the last time, shoulders slumped, eyes red. Hope you're happy you won, he muttered, voice hoarse. I wanted to shout that there were no winners here, but the words caught in my throat. Selling the house felt unreal, a final thread being snapped. Realtors walked through, discussing market value like ancient joys and heartbreaks meant nothing. Neighbors stopped by, offering awkward condolences as the for sale sign went up. My daughter drew pictures of Grandpa's garden, asking if we'd ever visit again. I shook my head, holding back tears, knowing I'd lost more than bricks and mortar. In the end, most of Dad's treasures were gone forever, scattered in pawn shops and strangers' homes. A few precious things were returned, 2 of Dad's watches, 1 battered guitar that the police managed to track down. They sit now in my house, reminders of what once was, and of what can never be fully repaired. Our family, too, fractured in ways I never thought possible. Thanksgiving passed that year in silence, John didn't show, and the empty seat at the table was its own kind of punishment. Aunt Helen tried to make small talk but gave up, tears glistening in her eyes. Even Mr. Kern stopped calling as often, his old friend gone, the laughter of grandchildren no longer echoing down the hallway. It took time to realize that sometimes justice comes with its own kind of loss, a hollow victory traded for the warmth of family. In quiet moments, I missed the brother I thought I had, mourned the home built from more than wood and stone. But through it all, some lessons are carved deep, the value of standing up for what's right, the scars left by betrayal, and the truth that sometimes, no matter how hard you fight, you can't fix what others are willing to destroy. As seasons change and the old house fades into memory, I carry forward the things my parents taught me. Forgiveness is powerful, but it doesn't always mean reunion. Moving on doesn't mean forgetting. Some wounds mend, others linger, teaching us who we are and what we refuse to become. So to everyone watching, ask yourself, what would you do to protect the things, and people, that matter most? When is the price of justice too high for forgiveness? Leave your thoughts in the comments, and remember, the hardest fights sometimes bring the deepest truths. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this story with us. Your support truly means a lot. If you found the video meaningful, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. It really helps us grow and bring you more content you'll enjoy. We'd also love to hear your thoughts and feedback in the comments, so feel free to share whatever's on your mind. Every message helps us make this channel better for you. Thanks again, and see you in the next video.